how to position yourself to be very productive and also get the recognition for the value you are adding to the organization. I will ask few questions to the panel members and then open it to all the attendees. First question, majority of us feel that we are contributing at or above expectations on an average. Yet a lot of us at times get frustrated that we are not getting promotions or financial recognition. Why is there a mismatch and how to manage it? So, who wants to take this question first?
Okay, excuse me. I think part of what we expect to happen stems from our own mindset. And the mindset that we come from, and I discussed this at our table, and I'll let the others give them their perspectives, is this, especially this happens from people from India and China. I have a lot of clients, I would say 60% of my clients who is Indians and Chinese. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, can you hear me now, right? Can you hear me? Okay. And the mindset is this, that, basically what our parents told us, work hard, obey your boss, don't make sound, don't raise your hand, put your head down, and you'll get what you deserve. That's what our parents told us, right? And I would say that our parents were wrong. And the reason I say that they were wrong is because you don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. And we, especially from where we come from, we are not very good at negotiating before we do something. We go to our manager after we deliver something, and when that happens, somebody else has already taken credit for what you've done. And then it becomes much harder. So the mindset I want you to go in with, and I discussed this at our table, and this works every single time, is that identify something that's a pain point within your department. Figure out a way that you can solve it. And before you solve it, meet with your manager and say, this is my assessment of what the pain is. This is what I think I can do to solve it. And when I give you the solution fully delivered, this is what I want from you. Is that a deal? And he will probably say, or she will probably say, yes, that's a deal. So then you go back to your office, send them a quick email saying, thank you for meeting with me. We have this deal now, right? And that's the email that stays on the record. And I can't tell you how many times we've done this. Now, I've worked with 5,000 clients globally since I became a career coach 10 years ago. And this has never not worked. I'm saying it is unqualified, with no qualification. This has never not worked. And so what I want you to do is two things, especially from where we come, our Indian mindset, is that don't assume that you get what you deserve. You get only what you negotiate. And you negotiate before you deliver it. That takes a lot of guts. But you have nothing to lose, because if you didn't deliver what you promised, you're not any worse off than you were before you had that meeting. And the thing that happens is, when you do that, you rise to the challenge and deliver and in fact exceed that expectation. This is how we work as human beings. So that's my take on it, and this is how I coach all my clients, so I'm not telling you anything new.
Yeah, thanks, Dilip.
That's free.
I think you brought up a very important point, how we are brought up and how culture plays into our growth. I would like to add something on what he said was, I think when we try to aspire for something and we think at the end we deserved it, we never looked at the negotiation from a win-win perspective. We always look at putting ourselves into that particular shoes. But I think when you think you do something and you at the end deserve something, before even embarking onto that journey, just look at your managers or whoever you are reporting to, or whatever assignment you are aspiring to finish, or trying to grow with that particular assignment. Try to basically now understand, is that the priority for that particular person? Try to get that win-win kind of situation where it's not just what you think as the biggest pain point or what would achieve, make you achieve, but is it aligning with what whom you're reporting to, or whoever is going to give you that growth, is that the biggest pain point she has? Because sometimes the problem which we look at is the biggest, but it may not be the same. So try to get that win-win kind of situation, and I think you'll be better off.
So I like to approach the question from a preventative measure approach. So you can think of yourself, before you get yourself into the position where you're feeling as though you're unappreciated at work and you're not getting the bonuses that you deserve or the promotions that you deserve, take a step back. Let's look at before you even entered that company in that position to begin with, right? Did you select a position and did you select a company in which they reward performance and they have a culture of rewarding performance? Because if you select a company, and there are companies out there, especially the blue chip companies where age and experience are more highly valued than say performance. If you select a culture in which that is what is being rewarded, then your expectations have to be reset. But if you're in an innovative culture, if you're in a company that rewards what you do and how much you contribute to your team and to your environment, then you essentially set yourself up to climb the corporate ladder at a much more effective pace. Right? And another thing to add on top of that is I think too many times, and I fall into this trap myself, is that I fall in love with the position that I'm going after and not with the team. I haven't done enough analysis about the team that I've been working with. Because ultimately what helps you rise up to the corporate ladder is your boss, is the management team that is above you, and they are the ones that ultimately can help raise you up through the corporate ladder. If you don't have that support structure, if you haven't done the analysis to see who you're reporting to and who that person reports to, if you haven't looked at that thoroughly, then your ability to rise up is going to be severely limited. So I would encourage, from a preventative standpoint, look at what kind of environment and what kind of culture you're willing to support you if you perform up to par.
Okay, well, good point. All right, so since I'm forced to answer, I guess I have a slightly different and diagonal viewpoint in this, so I will voice it as I always do about everything else in life. First thing that I think there are two things to look at, and I'm going to just put my analogy and explain it. First, that squeaky wheel gets the grease. I don't know how many people have heard this, and it's a very common corporate disease. So what happens is that when you go need a raise, people start complaining before that or right after that, or if there is something happening, they just start complaining. I got a bad bonus, I didn't get as much as I was supposed to get, and so on and so forth. But there's also a second part of the saying, which I don't know is not very commonly known, is that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but when you go for service, it also gets replaced. So the point is that in the long run, if that is your career, if that's the company that you want, and you really want to go higher up there, and become one of the top management one day, then I think too much of being a squeaky wheel doesn't take you anywhere really. Now I come from a very slightly different background, so let me also say two lines about it just so that you understand why I'm saying what I'm saying. So today I'm a self-employed entrepreneur. I run my own setup, I don't have a boss, I'm bossless, so to speak. So I make my decisions and everything is a different story. But in my sort of past career, so to speak, a few years back when I was regularly employed, I used to work for a very rigid, very competitive segment. Basically, I was doing a lot of high-end technology for the banking world in New York. And a lot of that is very cutthroat, lots of money involved, lots of bonuses, lots of reward, lots of everything. So everybody's trying to just outdo everybody else. And the one thing that I learned there is that if you really want to make it big in that kind of a career, it may not hold in the same thing in, let's say, working for, a startup, because every company has its own sort of story, is you should focus more on the long-term goal one. You should look at what you want to do 5-10 years from now. What is it you want to do? Whether you want to become a big manager, a big technology expert in the company, you want to make lots of money, you want to just be recognized a huge amount, not necessarily translating into money, or whatever it is. Everybody has their own personal goals. So kind of get that right. And then the best thing you can actually achieve it is, apart from working hard and everything, identify a mentor. Now this may sound very vague, but at the end of the day, companies are basically made of people. And I think at the end of the day, wherever there are a lot of people, there are two or three things. There's lots of competition, there's lots of politics, and there's lots of difference of opinion, and there's lots of different ways of looking at the same thing. So that you cannot avoid. It's just, I guess, part of being human. So I think the important thing to do is have somebody to help you navigate the system. Now I'm not saying in a malicious way, I'm not saying you should start crooning up to someone and so they necessarily push you up. That's not what I'm suggesting, but I'm saying having a mentor, which is essentially somebody high up in the organization, may not be in your direct chain of hierarchy, but somebody of influence, somebody who knows the company well, somebody who can give you the right things at the right time is probably the best thing you can do in your career. And believe me, if you kind of look back today, and I don't know if you folks have really spent time reading biographies of very successful big people like Jack Welch as a case in point, or people like that who people kept quoting in corporate America, each one of them rose today to where they are thanks to their mentor. Pretty much. That's the story, bottom line. If you had to summarize it in one line and say, why is Bloomberg where he is? Why is Jack Welch where he is? It all points out to one fact. They all found the right mentor at the right time who kind of helped them catapult and take to the next level. It was the right catalyst. Because it's very difficult beyond a point to prove who's smarter than the other, who's working less hard or more hard, and especially if the company is good and competitive. I mean, I'm pretty sure most of you work for great companies here in Silicon Valley. It's very difficult to prove within the team that one really outdoes the other, or one is really worse than the other. And so it all ends up becoming impressions, and how people perceive you, how many people know you in the system, what people think of you, how many people think how responsible you are, whether you want to be here, and so on and so forth. So anyway, I mean, I think I dragged this question quite a bit, but my viewpoint was essentially one bottom line, that don't focus too much on the immediate problem. Because if you focus too much on the immediate problem, I think you'll get totally drowned in it, and you'll never end up solving the long-term goals that you've got in your life. So step back, look at what you want to achieve, find your right sort of strategies, and go forward. Get there. Sorry.
Correct. Yeah, last follow-up questions, Biren and Anand can take up. All of us would like to get promoted. Maybe we know what we are doing, but our managers and people around us don't know what we are doing. What are some of the things we can do to enhance our visibility within an organization, and is that important?
So I think one way to definitely improve your visibility is is if you look at any big corporation or even small startups where I'm a little bit more focused in, there's a lot of white space, there's a lot of new areas that the company has initiatives or trying to get into new markets and new areas that are of critical importance. Right? If you can find a way to get onto those projects, I think what it allows you to do is it gives you a lot more white space for you to work into. And secondly is, if you succeed, especially these initiatives get recognized at a much higher corporate level. So what it allows you to do is, one is you're able to develop skill sets that are outside of your what you've been working for the last 5-10 years. And secondly is, now it puts you say you work on a strategy project or a new market. Instead of just releasing version 2.0 or version 10.0 of the same product, right? If you go out and try to find out what's this new product, what new market can the software identify or this product can do, the chances are is tomorrow if you need somebody, if the company is looking for somebody to lead that product, they're more likely to pick you or and help you get that indirect promotion and the visibility in every shape or form. So maybe that would be my recommendation, is probably step out of what you are exactly doing, maybe 1 turn, 2 turns, 3 turns is maybe good enough. Maybe time to broaden skill sets and maybe go out and do something else.
I think to some degree this same question relates to the previous one as well, and a couple of soft points there. So some organizations, particularly startups, they have a tendency of, or they claim that they are meritocracy driven, and all we know that it's more of an entire corporate America, in snakes and ladders. There are more snakes than ladders, obviously, right? So we need to navigate through the system, and most of the time it's not the kind of work you do, but the perception of what you're doing is more important. And in some cases, what you mentioned was absolutely right. Stepping back from what you're doing and focusing on other areas is more important, and the key to the visibility. And however, there is one caveat in that approach, which I have seen particularly, so that's why I can vividly remember. It's like when you try to focus on too many things outside of your core work area, it might be negatively perceived as you are, instead of focusing on your own work, you tend to look around and you just try to explore things, and instead of focusing on your own core piece of work, which actually at the end of the day drives your paycheck. So that's a very crucial balance in between, like where to focus. But apart from there, ultimately you have to prove. So in the startup world, it's more of an action oriented. So hand waving doesn't work in the startup world. You have to get done like some hardcore stuff. It's basically delivering something concrete, which is obviously making a difference into company's business, customers, revenue, or all of the above. So only then there is an obvious touch point for gaining that visibility. And another soft point I would like to mention, which is equally applicable to the previous question, is sometimes the decision makers go beyond your immediate manager or chain of command. So keeping those other people whom your manager refers to or has a good relationship with, keeping those people also familiar with what you're doing, keeping them up to date with what your achievements are, or having good relationship with those guys also, it's equally important, as important it is to in your own hierarchy.
So the next question is, a lot of us are more passionate about a certain area, and then we try really hard to get into that and settle in that area. Then demand and supply will change for a certain skill over a period of time. How do we keep an eye on what is going on around us? How should we train ourselves to transition from one area to another area? For example, in one area you have 10 years of experience, and in another area you don't have any experience. How to bridge that gap?
Okay, this is something that is strange for people to hear, but this is what I do in my practice, and I'll tell you what that is. The technology, and I'm going to say three things here, and very quickly. The technology is changing so fast right now that you need to figure out a way to verbalize not what you've done or what you do, but to figure out who you are. All the resumes are about what you've done. If you can figure out a way to verbalize who you are, then what you've done almost becomes irrelevant in a large context. And what I've done in my own practice is figure out a tool to articulate and verbalize your own genius. And if you can pivot your value proposition around that genius, then that becomes applicable no matter what technology you are pursuing. I myself, this is my 5th career, very different careers. And part of what it took me 25 years to figure out is how do you identify your own genius, your own spark, we all have it, and verbalize it so that you can pivot your value proposition around it, and it then becomes timeless. You can apply it in any direction you want. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is, and this is very dear to me, that most of us believe that smartness, IQ, is what takes us to success in our life. The actual studies have shown that when you graduate, the correlation between IQ and your grades is 95%. The correlation between IQ and adult success is 20%. So it doesn't matter how smart you are. There are 4 other Qs that go into the equation, and I'll tell you what they are quickly and I'll stop. IQ is the one that's God-given, you can't change it. But then there's a EQ, emotional intelligence. Then there's a PQ, political intelligence. Then there is a CQ, cultural intelligence, and XQ, contextual intelligence. We can all develop those just by being aware of, and there are articles, I have written several articles about them. So what I want you to do is, first of all, summarize, find out who you are, not what you've done, and try to understand how to verbalize that. That's your genius. And secondly, focus away from IQ and get into the other Qs if you want to be more successful.
So similar point, and just a little bit of my background, and because I've switched careers a few times, and I'm definitely, I think, the youngest one in this group. But given my young age, I have switched careers a few times, and there's been one consistent theme. Personally, as I've continued to switch through different careers in my life, I started out when I first graduated from undergrad. I was in the investment banking world. I was doing mergers and acquisitions for technology companies. Transitioned back to being a hardware engineer, being a design engineer. Transitioned over to being a product manager. Now I'm in the startup industry doing software. Now I've switched multiple times within my short career span. But what has been the consistent factor between all those switches? And that is passion, right? and I definitely agree with Dilip that IQ is not really the determining factor in determining what makes you successful. It's how passionate you are, and if you're able to communicate that passion to the people that are around you. As I'm going and growing my team here in the U.S., I'm not looking for a pedigree background. I'm looking for how passionate are they? Have they done their homework before they showed up to the interview? Do they know the market? Did I sense that feeling of excitement when I'm talking with them? Because if that excitement is there, it'll be amazed. People will be amazed at what leaps and bounds and what hoops people will jump through to achieve that end goal if they're passionate. Right? So I think the one thing that everybody, if you're passionate about a specific industry and you want to get into it, demonstrate that passion to the people who are interested in learning about it.
Okay, just adding to the bit that's already spoken. Firstly, that when I also go about hiring people for my own work or just generally assessing people, and I'm going to start with that. I usually look at just 3 parameters, which is first, what is the commitment out there? What is the commitment to learn, commitment to do something, like how committed is the person in general to pick up that role to do well. The second is just ability to learn. How open are they to learning? And the third thing is how much initiative do they have? Because a lot of people have the ability and the intent, but they never end up doing anything. So how much initiative do they have? Will they actually go out and learn it? And I think that that's the key driving factor that we've all seen in the last few years, because as you rightly said, the technology, and I'm just speaking technology for the moment because that's pretty much what I do all the time. So I must have changed a lot of sort of technology, so to speak, and always been at the leading edge of it. But at the end of the day, I just do technology, technology, and technology. And I have realized that if you've been in this space, in the last 10 to 15 years, things have just rapidly changed every couple of years. It's like newer technology, newer frameworks, newer languages, newer tool sets, newer ways of doing the same thing. And especially if you are one of the hands-on developers or architects or people who is actually building the piece of software, it's very baffling, it's very confusing because you just kind of managed to learn something and now it's time to unlearn it and learn something new. And I think the one thing that kind of draws to all of this is, well, firstly, do you have that ability? Can you change from one to the other and not get bogged down by the fact that, oh, I spent 4 years learning this and God, this is not good technology anymore, right? So if you're one of those people who think that, who gets tired and gets bogged down by the fact that you invested so much time, energy, money in something and it's not valuable anymore, then I think, honestly speaking, if you're a pure technology, you shouldn't be in that business. Now, this is a very radical viewpoint, but this is really true because, every job brings along a collection of technologies. The second part that I want to mention is, and this is more from a technology landscape, when we moved from client-server type to the web development world, and today from web to mobile, the one thing that happened is that people moved from doing one technology for many years to doing many things at the same time. Now, this is pretty true. I mean, the same person who was doing, let's say, a very front-end, doing very one type of desktop-centric jobs, when you move that, translate the same to the web world, they do a lot of different roles. They do client-side development, they do middle-tier development, they deal with caching, they deal with databases, they deal with network protocols, and so on and so forth. What I'm saying is the whole bundle has increased. You cannot learn one small thing and thrive today as a good technologist. And so connected with this is the fact is just how much can you grasp? Do you have the ability to learn? Can you sit down? Can you pick up a new piece? Or will you get bogged down? Last of all, to wrap this point up, is that from a recruitment and career standpoint, I think that the traditional resume is slowly getting outdated. Now, don't take me wrong. I know some of you probably deal a lot more with resumes than I do, so I don't mean to challenge the standard norm. But the fact is that today, the LinkedIns of the world, the word of mouth, the open source software contribution, the publications that people do, the other stuff that they do in the meetups like this or communities or whatever, speaks much louder than resumes. And people can easily decipher over a period of time who is worth their salt, who knows their stuff, who doesn't. Gone are the days when you could write stuff behind a resume and hide there and just feel that that's the only image in the outer world. It's not, unfortunately. People can go and Google for names and find out in 5 minutes what you've actually done and what have you really done. And that's, of course, one side of it. The flip side of it is that you can really take advantage from that. And advantage from that from the fact that, if you have some spare time, write some great open source software. If, just as a case in point, I'm just doing that because I did that a lot. Because I just enjoyed doing it, not just to promote myself, but just enjoyed doing it. And the more you do that, you get more feedback, people will recognize you. You will get job offers, believe me. You won't have to go out hunting for resumes or going through anyone. If you start just showing your skill set, sharing it with people, and just keep learning.
Maybe I think to what I've been said, I think one part is I still think that if you do a good job, like maybe your manager doesn't want to recognize you, or you're not a good negotiator and other kind of stuff. But I think people do recognize, like, and I've seen this increasing in startups, is when people come over, they bring the people whom they know they want to work with and who are capable of working or making things happen. So I think your work and your, while it will not necessarily speak in terms of promotions or like your immediate raise, but clearly I think don't underestimate your good work doesn't go hidden somewhere. People always come back and recognize. It's very surprising. You go and talk to people and then you say, I want to hire this guy, and very often it's the same guy that multiple people refer at the same time. So maybe they were your peers, they were your managers, but when it comes to maybe being in the same foxhole, don't underestimate that quality.
Okay. Corporate politics, how to deal with it. Some people get promoted whom you think are not deserving, and why? Who wants to take it? I think Dilip, you have to take it because you have dealt with 4,000 people.
I don't want to monopolize this, but here is the problem. I think the way we frame this whole question around politics creates this apprehension around politics is something bad. But if you look at the word politic, P-O-L-I-T-I-C, politics, the word means shrewd. It's an adjective. That's the meaning of the word. It's shrewd. And so what I want you to think about is how do you want to, and this is one of the Qs that I talked about. PQ is one of the 5 Qs. And so you need to understand, if you want to succeed, you want to be able to play that game. And I mean that in a positive sense, not in a negative sense. And what is the game? The game is to understand people's agendas. That's being politic, that's being shrewd. And understand how you can align your value proposition or your agenda with the prevailing political view or prevailing view, or the one that is going to win the war, if you will. And so what I want you to learn to do is understand that and try to align with that person. And once again, I'm not saying this in a negative way. This is how the world works. There's nothing strange about it. This is how an enterprise works. With human beings more than 2, this is how it works. So what I want you to understand is, and once again, don't focus on how smart you are. It doesn't matter. It's only 20%, as I just told you. These studies show this. So you need to find out, how can I focus on the other aspects of the 4 Qs that I just talked about? And how can I leverage that to go in the direction I want to go without offending others? And it's not as hard as most people seem. Because they're so focused on how smart they are and how right they are. This is the problem with a lot of Indians, including me. And so don't focus on that. Focus on all the other things that you can do. And I think then politics does not become a dirty word if you look at it from that perspective. That's my honest opinion.
I think I would just like to say that do whatever you enjoy. I think when you enjoy the things which you're doing, all this politics and all that, you stop looking at them from the way that they are hindrance. You're actually progressing because you enjoy that stuff, what brings you motivation and inspires you. I can refer to a Harvard Business Review. I don't know who wrote it, but he categorized people into 3 categories. One is the planners, which plan their life. You basically decide that if I do this particular course, I can grow onto this. The second category is pioneers, who try to embrace new stuff. And the third ones I think he referred to is explorers, who always are looking out for cutting-edge technology, if I have to give an analogy. And I think look at yourself, assess yourself, and see where you feel you are. And I think if you go along that route, if you're planners and you become a part of big strategic projects, you are now basically enjoying what you were doing. And similarly for pioneers and explorers, once you start enabling yourself as a part of your capability and aligning yourself, I think you would see politics getting shadowed, and rather than your work showing what you are. I'm sorry, I'm passing the mic to you, but I think it's...
Now I'm forced to speak. If you look at the office, I think all of us have been in offices before, and you look at the office, where do relationships get built? Who in your office has the tightest relationships? And how did that relationship get solidify? How did it get built? Well, it's, one way is definitely through the working relationship and the work that you do and the communication of the work that you do. Another way is outside the office, outside of your desk, outside of your cube, and essentially opening yourself up in a way that exposes who you are outside of the working environment, right? People are much more able to connect with you when they're connecting with the individual, with the person, and not with your work. And that's how you actually build these strong relationships, and people call it politics, but it's a friend system, right? People tend to group together around friends. So when I look at some of the previous offices in which I've worked at, I see people who complain about politics, but haven't opened themselves up to their coworkers. I go out to lunch, and I see, people eat lunch grouped by race, right? Let's all be serious. We've all been guilty of that ourselves. All the Indians sit together and they eat lunch together. All the Chinese people sit together and they eat lunch together, right? All the other various ethnicities sit together and they eat lunch together, right? And these are also the same people who are complaining about politics and why they have not been promoted through the corporate ladder. Well, I put the onus on the people that are closing themselves off, because what have they done to open themselves up to the office relationship, right? Because it's only when people really understand you as a person, and not just through your work itself, that these true bonds work and people will stand up for you. Somebody believes in you and believes in your character and believes in your morals, then that's when people will stand up for you and fight for you when it's time to get your bonuses and time to get your raises.
Okay, I don't know what else I can add actually. But yeah, the fact is, I think we should probably split this into two parts, and I'm just sort of speaking as I'm thinking. The first is that I think there's a big sort of cognitive dissonance or perception problem also involved when such situations are there. The issue is that I think each one of us likes to think that we are superior, that we are really smart as compared to everybody else. And I don't know if this is a ethnic thing or not, but I think most people I know are like that in one way or the other. They don't like to be wrong. They don't like to be second. They don't like to be thought of as not competent in something, right? The fact in life though is, and this holds for me also, which I also take it with a lot of grudge honestly, is that you can't do everything well. There are things that we all end up not doing well. But what happens is that we don't want to accept it. And I think if you take it as a sum total, and I'm not trying to say that you did a bad job and whoever that, I think the question was that somebody else who was less deserving and less smart than you, whatever, got promoted or got more bonuses or whatever, right? So I think that instead of focusing on that, I think the bigger problem here is that did you really do everything that you could do and focus on your strengths? Whatever your strengths were, that you were actually able to bring it forward in a very positive manner, without necessarily being bogged down by the fact that you weren't rewarded or the person next door is an idiot and whatever, he's still going up or I'm going down, and getting bogged down by all those kinds of issues, right? The fact is that it's human, so people get emotional about it. And the second flip side is that I think once you get into that cycle, it's sort of a very vicious cycle. It can really pull you down. I mean, you start getting unfriendly with your colleagues, your relationships get bad, you feel the whole world is against you, you don't like your boss, you feel people are grouping up against you, and so on and so forth. It's a very, again, weird tendency that you tend to develop. Some people can go full extreme, some people go a little bit, but I'm saying it's very natural. So my only piece would be try to break out of the cycle. just don't get bogged down by that. I mean, find out a way. I think each one of us will have our own way of figuring that out. You know, like I think Paul mentioned that good idea. You know, go mix with people, understand what they're thinking, or you know, like there were some other thoughts, viewpoints here in terms of you know, focus at the rest 80%. I think, as Dilip was saying, you know, find out the other areas where you can also maximize. But I think the bottom line is don't get bogged down by it, because it's a bad disease to have. You know what I'm saying? And the worst part is you are the one who gets affected, nobody else. So don't suffer under that disease. Just be happy and enjoy. If it's not working your way, that's fine. You know, find out and solve it. But then not bring you down.
Just one small note. I agree with all stuff that's said. I think in big companies it's easy to play politics and get shielded by politics or get promoted by politics. But from small startup spaces, especially if you're a 5 or a 10 startup company, politics absolutely kills the company. So if you're joining a startup or if you're planning to join any of my startups, planning to play politics, let me know. I think it's absolute disaster in every shape or form. And there's zero, and to be honest, I think there's zero tolerance. I think it's important to be aware and stuff like that. But these, if you're 2 or 3 people playing politics in a 5 or 10 company startup, that startup 9 out of 10 times just folds.
Paul brought up a very good point about making sure that mingling with different groups. And last month we had a very good Power Connect lead like Samir Kera, who is the IT director. He did mention that he makes it a point that he doesn't want people to be the folks who are working in their own group typically end up meeting those guys in the All Hands meeting also. But he makes it a point that they mix with other groups also. Anyway, so now I would like to open up the questions to all the attendees. So who would like to ask the first question? Loaded or light one, whichever one you want. Yeah, Pradeep, yeah, go ahead.
Do you look at employees who put up too many hours? Does it help? One guy works for 60 hours, one guy works for 40 hours, doesn't matter. It does, on the top of it, we do get to know that don't really stretch yourself, get a good work-life balance. But what exactly happens in your mind? Without your knowledge, do you give preference to somebody who is putting in those extra hours? I'd like to be interested to hear from you about that.
I think at the end of the day, it's the results which show. So even if you're putting 60 hours a day or 40 hours a day, the manager is going to judge you on the results. So I would say let's not get bogged down on the hours spent. I think let's become result oriented, because that's what the manager is going to assess you.
After having worked at both the startup and enterprise world, I can add a few cents to the same thing. When you are comparing apples to apples, yes, that does make a difference. So if 2 equally smart people are, one is working 40 hours and one is working 60 hours, naturally the 60-hour guy is going to produce more to comply with the result-oriented philosophy, and that's absolutely true. In some cases, I've seen the completely opposite philosophy as well. People look at the guy who is working at 60 hours as if that guy has to work 60 hours in order to achieve the same level as 40-hour guy. So that guy must be underproductive. So people think from a different perspective as well. And when you are speaking about different startup culture versus enterprise culture, if you're planning to join a startup to support Anand's point? Yeah, planning to support Anand's point, don't expect work-life balance if you're planning to join a startup. It's not going to be there. So speaking of that itself should not be as an anticipated manner. So joining or actually contributing 40 hours, 60 hours, that question itself should not come up if you are part of a startup or planning to launch your own startup. It's all up in the mind, but ultimately it's all result-oriented stuff. How much you are delivering, how much value you are producing for the company you are working for, that's what counts in that.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just add one bit. I think if you're running your own business and it's a startup, then I think the work-life balance is you get to go home. And the other work-life balance is that you get some part of Sunday. But the fact is that I think, honestly, I don't know who works 40 hours here. Who's working 40 hours? You please raise your hand. I'd like to know such people. Okay, so there are some people like that. I was just kidding, but the fact is I think most of us don't work 40 hours.
I will add something to that. I had to fight for, we were working 60 hours a day.
Right.
We took up with the management that we are working for 60 hours a day. And then we are not getting paid for that. So management took up with the client that our guys are working for 60 hours per day and they're not getting paid for that. So they renegotiate the whole thing. Then we got an agreement also done with the client. Then finally when it came to delivering that part of the money to us as a vendor, the managers and the client were again from India. That is a cultural problem. So they said, no, you won't pay the extra hours. So you do whatever you can do. Then we had to put down some people, not everyone. That's okay. Everything has been discussed, everything has become transparent, and now what to do? So we took a stand individually that we will not deliver work for more than 40 hours because we are not getting paid. So the deal is not that.
Okay, well, you're the lucky few then. Yeah, please.
So the thing is that individually some people have taken that stand, but that is not the stand of the company, our vendor company. So the situation is very difficult.
Sure.
That we are not getting support from our company, we are not getting support from the client manager, and we are in the sandwich position. And then that is the problem across the board because all the IT vendor companies from India who are basically present there across the board, all of them, the top management is not taking part into supporting this stand. That if the client is not paying more than 40 hours, then client should not be given more than 40 hours. So this is the kind of situation all of us are facing. So most of us who we are talking that who is working for 40 hours only. So that is the situation which is driving the whole thing where people are delivering for more than 40 hours but they are not getting compensated for more than 40 hours whatever they are doing.
Okay,
so
sure.
Now the challenge comes in this way. What do? We have to not answer question only up to the half part of that. We have to take it further. We have to add more question into that thing. So the question which is coming now to what you are saying, to your answer, that who is working for only 40 hours? Why we are not working for 40 hours? Are we getting compensated for more than 40 hours? And things like that. And then the dialogue becomes complete. That is
Sure.
what I would like to bring in.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. So I think that, I'll just quickly sort of give over to others also, don't mean to hog the mic here, but the fact is, so I think most people don't work 40 hours, that's how I understand, okay? I never worked 40 hours, unfortunately, fortunately, all my life so far. I know work-life balance is a great thing and should be there, and I wish each one of us spent more time, and it's all positive, it's all great. But I think practically speaking, most work weeks typically are in that 60-hour range, as people are talking about, right? And people I've seen, including me, in the past and even now, stretch nicely up to 80 hours, maybe even more and more and more, working through weekends, working late nights, and whatever else. As Biren rightly pointed out, I think for a startup, or if you're working your own thing, it's not uncommon if you just keep working and working for 14, 15 hours at a go also. It's just very normal. I would recommend all of you see this video which I had seen. I'll try and find the link and maybe send it to, which was making of YouTube, where these 4 guys made YouTube, and he said that we used to go home once in 6 or 7 days. They had got sleeping bags there because they had money running out and they had to get everything online. So it was like one guy used to sleep, one guy used to code, then the guy who finished coding used to code and the other guy used to sleep. And in order to incentivize us to give him beer every once in a while. But the fact is that that's how startups work. You have limited resources, you have limited time, you have the same 5 smart people, and they're committed also. I think half of the time those people do it voluntarily. They're not being pushed or forced to do it. That said, I think the compensation part is that one way or the other, like if you're in a corporate setup and you're working extra hours, you're probably expecting, all the other stuff we spoke about this evening so far, raise, more money, more responsibility, whatever, because you feel you get more visibility because of that. And oftentimes you do get visibility, things happen. If you are building your own startup, the eventual goal is that one day the startup will be successful, and so there will be some form of payback one way or the other. So I think it's really not that you're doing it for free. I mean, most people are conscious why they're working hard. There is some known or unknown goal behind it. But having said that, I think our gentleman really pointed out a very valid thing also. Sometimes companies force you. There's just a culture of sitting till late or just hanging out till late, and you feel like you are the odd person. How can I go home now? Everybody in my group is sitting till late. I think that's a bad piece to get stuck into. I mean, that does happen. It's a very common corporate culture to say, oh, this guy leaves at 5 o'clock, must be useless, right? And I think that, yeah, that's unfortunately, sometimes companies take active roles, you know, like people come into contracts. Or I know of companies where people had these rules, of course, off and on, that they would switch the lights off in the company. They were like that. I mean, Citibank did that at one point in time. They say that 6 o'clock all lights will be off. You want to sit in the building without air conditioning and lights, your problem. So obviously everybody started leaving. But then after a while, everybody realized, oh, it's not working because even the bosses want to stay in office. So then they revoked the rule. So what I'm saying is, companies try. Companies like Google try, okay, bring your laundry, we'll wash it for you. But the fact is that they still want you to be there and work more, right? So the work-life balance and working 40 hours, I think, is a great goal. I don't think anybody really achieves it in real life, from what I have known. If there is a way that it can be achieved, let me also know. I'll also like to do it.
Sunil, you had a question. You want to come forward and talk?
I've been working for like 20 years in Silicon Valley, and initial 5 years I spent at Intel, and then I went to medium-sized companies, and I went to startups, and now I'm with IBM for 10 years. So in other companies I was a manager, you know, project lead, project manager, but in IBM I'm mostly working with like corporate, like clients, partners, customer satisfaction, and I'm seeing IBM from outside, how IBM operates. I see a lot of decisions, managerial decisions are being made like hidden from us. A lot of information are coming up. Sometimes I feel, you know, how they can make these decisions without talking to us, without involving us. Can anybody comment on that? Like you know, why decisions are made, you know, hidden? Big companies. Big companies. We can't reveal that.
So my viewpoint on that, it's going to be a really short answer. Speed. If you want to get a consensus at a company like IBM, it's going to take you forever. Look at our government, right? Look at Washington D.C. Look at Capitol Hill, right? How long does it take to pass legislation? Well, it's partly because we're a democracy and we have debates, and that's good for government. But when you're talking about business, when time is money, you need speed. So yes, I believe that there's certain decisions that can only be made by certain individuals because you need speed and you need speed of execution.
I think I'd like to add that everybody thinks in their role that they have to be decision makers, but it's not the truth. I think you need to analyze that is the decision, you have to be part of that decision or you have to be informed of that decision. I think once you have that clarity, you will stop fighting in your mind that, okay, you were not part of the decision. Everybody would think they should have sold this company after talking to me, but that's not the case. There are target roles in the company who have to take that decision and then decide whether you're going to acquire this company or you're going to sell your company. So I know it's a culture we are in that we are brought up with consensus-based approach, but it's not the case. There are definite roles in the company who are the decision makers depending on the decision which needs to be taken.
I would just offer a nice acronym that I had heard and to support what she mentioned. It's like sometime back, I forgot which management tier it was part of, but there are like a system of RASI chart, R-A-S-C-I. So it's like you are responsible or accountable supporter and consulting role or just informing role. So which role? I mean, everybody wants to be decision maker, but the upper management doesn't see you in that role. They probably see you in just the informant role, or sometimes not even that. And there's always like a cone of silence around any decision. So depending on the kind of decisions, sometimes you are made aware of, sometimes you are being involved as a decision maker, contributor to the decision, and sometimes you are just bypassed. That's how things run, basically.
And
And I think unfortunately some of the reasons have to do with SEC regulations as well, especially big decisions. So they want to limit the information because they want people trading on that information, and not that people will use that because some of the decisions don't necessarily move the stock up and down, but if you are going out and acquiring a company and stuff like that, I think they want to be very very cautious around those kind of announcements, and I think that's driving a lot of the behavior at the top level.
Yeah, also just one small bit that I'll add is I think that rumors spread farther than real information. So obviously, even if you give out like a little, it becomes a whole ocean. So I think if anything is critical, I think the general attitude is to hold it back and keep it limited within a small set, because you don't know what it will end up becoming and what it will get interpreted as, what repercussions it could have. So you don't want to deal with all those things. You have your business to run and decisions to make and taking things forward. So usually, I think that's one big factor also, where people just don't want to divulge things when it's not completely concrete and they're still at discussion phase and still figuring things out, because the interpretations could just run havoc in a firm and have all kinds of random outcomes which they don't want to deal with.
So last question before we wrap up. You can come forward or be louder.
Yeah, I'm loud enough. How does an employee deal with a situation where he is stuck between ego or politics between two very senior people in the company? And one instance is where you work in a division, but you have a dotted line boss or senior manager, senior director, VP in headquarters, and you have a GM in a division. What is the employee supposed to do in this kind of a scenario?
Clarity.
I think it's a very tricky situation to be in. These dotted lines are normally very not easy to manage. I think the only thing which comes in my mind is you need to assess between your dotted line relationship as well as your regular relationship, who exactly wants what. And I think if you try to, it may be hard to align to both, but I think that would be the best situation if you can align to both. Worst case situation, you need to see who's going to write your performance appraisal or who has more value in the corporation and align to that.
Yeah, I think this is not that uncommon. I know of very few organizations that don't work in a matrix structure. So anytime you have a matrix structure, you're going to have two bosses. So what you have to learn to do, and this is once again becoming proactive versus reactive, is that you need to set the expectations with each of the bosses as to what they expect of you and what they should expect in return. And you should keep track of that, and if the conflict is so toxic, for example, between those two, you need to bring them together, and I have done that. If you do it well, you can do it with finesse. And so what you can say is, so two things I'm saying: set the expectations with each of the chain of command, or if it's a matrix organization, it's not that uncommon. And anytime you start deviating in that and you get squeezed in the middle, appeal to both of them and say, I need to get together with the two of you and resolve this because this is not working. Somebody is getting hurt. And hopefully if you can make that hurt outside of you and say the customer is getting hurt. And the reason he's getting hurt is because there's a conflict between these two objectives. And we certainly don't want to hurt the customer. So if you can outwardly direct the squeeze you're in to an agency that they can relate to, that can be a very productive meeting. And I have done that in the corporate world when I was working. And generally it works. So try that if it works.
So Ranjan, a quick...
Yeah, the question is, what is the value of the currency honesty in today's corporate society? Honesty. What is the value of the corporate world?
So what is the value of honesty?
Yes, in
or in today's corporate?
I think it's very easy to look at all the CEOs that are in jail and you know, who wonder what's really going on.
Yeah, that is the reason I am asking.
Right, I know that, and it's very tempting to succumb to that kind of a temptation. But I think rather than looking outwardly, you need to look inwardly. There are two things I say to all my clients. Be genuine and be authentic, right? Nobody can take that away from you. No matter how bad things are, if you're honest to yourself, and if you're authentic in how you manifest, you will sleep well at night. I guarantee you that. So if you want to be playing shenanigans, and if you're okay, and some people are, with each version, each boss, they have a version of where the project is, right? And if you can live with that, it's okay. If you can sleep with that. But I tell that what prevails is you're being honest, you're being authentic, and you're telling the truth. And I don't think that if you are aligned with that kind of thinking, you'll ever regret being on the wrong path. That's my recommendation to all my clients.
Yeah, closing comments. So we all learned from Dilip like about 4 Qs, and Bala spoke about plan properly to get visibility, and other panel members also gave excellent inputs. And my personal experience has been that generally most of us think what is our point of view, what I will get, rather than what I'm going to give. So give something first to others, and then definitely a lot of people will recognize you. So with that, I would like to close this panel discussion, and I would like all of you to give a big applause to all our panel members. So we will have a dinner session and open networking. Please take advantage of networking with all our panel members.